I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Gabby Reece is on the show today. You may know her from her pro volleyball career, but she has worn many hats since. She's a fitness leader, a mom, model, TV host, and commentator. And we dig into her decision-making process. It's quite formulaic and also extremely strategic. We talk through several key times when she had to apply her process to why not now moments. And she also talks about her co-decision-making kind of philosophy with her husband, Laird Hamilton, who's a professional surfer and an all-around just really cool guy. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Gabby practices fierce honesty and bravery, and you'll definitely see that shine through. Before we hop into this episode, let me fill you in on a little secret of mine. That's Headspace. It's a guided meditation app, and I never imagined that doing something for 10 minutes a day could increase my quality of life so much. I've always struggled with knowing when to make things happen versus when to let things happen. Sometimes things go very well when I push on the gas, and sometimes not so much. It gets me into trouble. Headspace has helped me with learning how to trust my intuition. And I've tried meditation off and on for years. It's never stuck, but this time it has. I've made a very intentional shift in my morning routine, and that's to wake up, have my coffee, do Headspace, journal, and then I check my email, my social media, all of my devices. It's been a big shift, but great result. My aunt used to say, don't let anything rent space in your head for free. That's valuable real estate. Headspace allows me to be a much better landlord of my thoughts, especially first thing in the morning. You can go to headspace.com/why not now for a free trial. And if you stick around to the end of the show, I'll tell you how you can get a month for free. Welcome to the show, Gabby. Super excited to have you on today, and thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks, Amy. I'm good. I'm doing well.
Good. You're in Hawaii right now, is that correct?
Yeah, fortunately, I've been traveling quite a bit and will be traveling quite a bit. So it sort of is 3 days here and 3 days out for about the next, and has been for the last few weeks. So I'm here, it's sunny, and then I head out tomorrow. So it's an interesting way. I almost enjoy it, or appreciate it, I should say, even more.
When you're back in and out, I can only imagine, and kind of nice reprieve and little paradise there.
It's like anything when it's like, how do we even view our life? What's great around us that we see every day,
Yeah, absolutely. And that travel gives so much perspective as well. But hopping right in, you've accomplished so many things and you've done so many things within your life, and it's been really inspiring to follow. But can you think of a specific time that stands out where you knew you had to make a decision and it kind of came down to a moment or a day, an hour, and you asked yourself, why not now?
Yeah, I think I've had different types of those. So, for example, like when I was a lot younger and I was at Florida State playing volleyball, I was 18 and I started also simultaneously in the summers working in fashion. I was kind of really responsible for myself at that point. I didn't have a ton of support from my family. When I started working, there was kind of this moment after a few months where I was going back to school my sophomore year. I was on scholarship, which is a kind of a for sure thing. And I had to kind of evaluate, because of the NCAA rules, giving up my scholarship to go for the risk and potential reward of working in fashion and sort of making a living, kind of beyond, because your scholarship covers your books and your housing and your, the academic part, but you have sort of no extra spending. And so I remember having to kind of really weigh that risk, and that it was worth going for. And ultimately, one of the reasons I made that decision was because of my coach at Florida State, a woman, Dr. Cecile Renaud, who helped me navigate that. So there was a lot of compromise, and it was scary because I was giving up a for sure thing for an unsure and unknown. And so that was one. I mean, I have a few others that I can share with you that are sort of in my more adult years. More recently, I hosted a show last year for NBC called Strong, and it was going to entail me sort of being away from my family sporadically for 8 weeks. And I had to, make that decision, and that became sort of a family decision, or at least one with my husband, because then he was going to be picking up the load on the other side. So that was a different type of, because that was sort of less risk professionally. It was actually for the gain professionally, but it was a personal risk. So I always say that there's kind of different elements when you're making these decisions, where one can be like a bottom line, a financial risk, one can be a time risk, and then you have sort of your relationships and personal obligations that you're kind of dealing with. So me being a mom, that's my number one. And then for me, it felt like a risk saying, yes, I'd be willing to be away from my kids that long. And now would this become a regular part of our lives?
And that's such an interesting way to look at it, and kind of that formula, or just bucketing, the types of risk. So when you decided to do the show, and you decided to, make the decision to have a portion of time where you wouldn't be with your family quite as much, what did that moment look like, or that day? You mentioned you involved your family to make the decision, but was it a family meeting, or sit down with your husband? Did you and Laird just talk it through, or what was kind of that final, okay, doing this? What did that look like?
I think, first of all, when I got the show, there were sort of all these signs saying that it really was a show for me. First of all, just the material first always has to feel good. And it was about people trying to be their best selves. And that, for me, I can get behind that message. And then they were filming, because I filmed the majority of it when my family, we live in Los Angeles 6 months of the year. And we live in Malibu County, and nobody shoots in Malibu, right? There's no way. Well, they shot, sort of 10 minutes from my house. So this was a way also I was keeping a level of normalcy with my family. And then the people that did the show were great. And then I got the show. So there's sort of two elements going on when you're making these decisions. So everything was pointing in the right direction to do the show. The bigger hurdle for me was then, okay, the show's going to continue to tape after my family then goes on to Hawaii. And so, yes, I sat with Laird because first of all, he's my partner in this, and where I was going to be less available, he was going to be the one picking up the slack. And so I just think ultimately, when you're making decisions, it's an odd thing to be making decisions that are the best for yourself, but then somehow really sort of saying, does it also feed the greater good? Meaning the relationship, the family, so it's, when you're singular, you're looking at it in, with certain lenses. And then when you start adding people into your life, you're bringing this in. So we had, discussions. It was a great opportunity. And so first of all, I think Laird was just supporting me in my professional life, that part of me. And saying, this is great and you have to go for it. And then, sort of looking at that, hey, if it works and it's a successful show, that doesn't hurt everyone, right? Like, girls are going off to college and, think that's just all part of the bigger picture. So I think you break it down into these ways. And as long as it's not at the cost of, because I think people have to look ahead sometimes and try to figure out how things will impact their entire situation. And then they can start weighing out, is it worth it? Because quite frankly, there would be no job in the long run, even if they backed up the Brinks truck at the end of it and said, okay, you guys are set for life, if it destroys your family. So, you just have to kind of do rack focus. You're looking long, and then you're looking in the immediate. You're looking at the fiscal part of it. You're looking at the creative and the challenge, right? Like for me, the other side of that is I was going to meetings for TV for 12 years. So there's just the part of me that, the business person, the person who does want those challenges, who does want that creative outlet. So, there's, again, it's identifying the dynamics and the roles and then saying, okay, after we look at all of it, is it really worth it?
This is interesting. It's like a portfolio, and you're managing this portfolio of different types of assets in your life, your family, your time, your financial, and you bring up such a good point that hasn't been discussed too much on the show with various guests, and that's your Why Not Now really was a co-decision, if you will. I mean, ultimately you had to decide, but you did have your partner in crime, but also your family, and I'm sure you probably discuss this a bit with your girls too. And it takes a little pressure, I guess, off of the one individual when they bring in, others.
I would say, though, quite frankly, I would rather, for me personally, it's just much easier because I don't mind making mistakes on my behalf. It's much more difficult when you feel that others are sacrificing or potentially sacrificing for something that is, yes, it's for me and it is for the family, but it's sort of at their cost for you. And especially the mom role. I mean, every mom can relate to, somehow we just feel, everything feels like, am I spending too much time with them? Am I not spending enough time with them? Am I too tough on them? Am I not tough enough on them? There's so much push and pull all the time. And so, yes, I like the idea of it being a lot of people deciding, but at the end, I prefer the decisions that, it's my neck and I'm risking, no problem. That's okay for me. But when you're talking about family and relationships, I don't know, the cost of that it's just higher and it's trickier. So it's nice to have the input, because also, like, my husband gives me great perspective, because he's not so emotional in a way, and where I'm taking it so serious, like, so many weeks, he's like, it's going to be fine, so that was nice.
I've heard you talk a little. Oh, go ahead.
Dance. No, I was just saying it's a dance,
Absolutely. And shifting gears for a moment, I was watching the video that you did with your daughter, Reece, and this was last year, I believe. And it just looked like you did it there either at your home gym, or it wasn't a highly produced video intentionally. It was just to share an important message, right? And that was talking about not just body image in general, but really just about the scale and these numbers. And you had kind of shared this dynamic, and obviously the challenges that we face at getting so focused on a certain number. And it was a really powerful video. And I encourage everyone to go check it out and Google it. But not only was the message important, I thought how you used your own voice and social media was so cool, because it's almost like you woke up one day and you're like, no, I want to address this. You flip the iPhone around, or your mobile phone, someone shoots it, and you get this message out, and then the traditional media picked it up, and you see these different articles, and I'm sure it led to other things. But can you talk a little bit about your view on how you use social media, and then also having 3 girls and teenage, age range? how that works in your household, and just in general, any thoughts or guardrails you have.
I like every parent, I struggle every day with it, especially with my younger two. We have a 21-year-old who seems to have opted to kind of, she's aware of that system, but she found that she was personally a lot happier if she wasn't so directly engaged with it. So she's sort of down the road from it. But my 13-year-old and certainly now my 9-year-old is moving into the pocket. So, well, first of all, that video was completely spontaneous. We were in the gym. If anyone ever sees it, I'm wearing like no makeup, sweatpants and a sweatshirt. And we had just come back and I was downstairs doing my physical therapy for my knee. And Reece was there and we were just sort of talking about it. And I said, hey, Reece, would you mind talking about this? Because I do think it's important. And she's like, yeah, sure. And so that's how that came about. I had no idea that, I know the topic is important, but people's responses were really passionate because it just a reminder that, and I never, I'm sort of getting to a place in my life where I almost hate to separate the genders, and sort of say, let's all address the humans first. But in this particular case, I will say, obviously, women are greatly affected by how do I look? How tall am I? What's my size? How much do I weigh? And that's a very old story. That story existed when I was young and it still exists. And maybe it's heightened because of the image bombardment and, social media, and everyone just looks incredible and done up and produced and everything online. And then girls are like, why don't I look like that? And it's like, well, because nobody looks like that. So I just thought it was important. And Reece is a pretty girl and she's a big girl. And you could have girls that are small girls and they're pretty girls. It's like, who's defining this? And also, someone said to me something, I realized this to be true. It's like, women are beautiful creatures in whichever way they arrive. And for me, it's them identifying that thing in themselves. And I think it's really important also to celebrate. I learned this from sports. Celebrate, and even in working in fashion, if you're around somebody and they have something great and shiny about them, or they're smart or talented or a combination, or they have beautiful hair, whatever it is, celebrate it, because not only does it have nothing to do with you as far as their greatness doesn't hurt your own greatness, but it can be liberating, right? It can free you. It's like when they say if someone you really are having a hard time with a person, that if you sort of send them well wishes or pray for them, how it can really liberate you. Mm-hmm. The same goes for celebrating the greatness in others, because they're not going to stop being great because you're frustrated by it. And I do think it's a training. I think your brain starts to go that way when you try to practice those habits. And that includes how we judge ourselves. And listen, it's easy for me to say this because I was forced here. I'm 6'3", now I'm back to 175 pounds. There's no way to fit into the other model, the size 2. It was never going to happen for me. So I could act all like I'm so smart and evolved. But the truth of the matter is I was pushed out of that nest, by 12 years old. So I was like, I'm either going to fly or I'm going to crash. And I think most people would just sort of say, okay, let me redefine it for myself.
It's a great tool, I think, that kind of gratitude and also being able to celebrate, others' wins and greatness. And it kind of brings me to my next question. And actually, I have to credit social media for this question. But I had someone ask me to ask you, with all of the different verticals that you've played in, no pun intended, but obviously sports volleyball and modeling and you're a mom and you're a fitness leader, so on and so forth. You've done well in each of them. And is there one thing that you would consider kind of your why you do what you do, an underlying driving force?
Yeah. Well, I probably have 2 whys. I have my subconscious why, and I probably have my more conscious why.
Interesting. I love how I've never thought of it that way, but carry on. That's very new. That's different. So
well,
excited to hear.
My subconscious why is there's probably a lot of fear there. I believe that for me personally, I grew up not in the most stable environment, and so my ability to look way down the road and navigate towards things that match me have to do with a survival mechanism. So people are always like, "Oh, you diversified so early," and I always say, yeah, okay, yes, I did. But again, when I was playing beach volleyball, for example, I understood that platform was pretty small, and that were there other things that were true to who I was, other areas that I could work in, that I could probably do a good job, that I would enjoy, that I was actually interested in. And so there's that why. And then as I've gotten older and I'm hopefully making new agreements, it's quite simple. I think when you start to become aware that you are fortunate to be able to do what you like to do as part of your living, or if you've been bestowed any gifts or talents, because people say it's themselves, but ultimately it's not. It's like, I feel like we're all just sort of portals for certain talents and gifts that we kind of bring and share, and that's what you do. If I think the other side of it is I started really feeling fortunate. Like, not everybody obviously gets to play athletics or take on new businesses or do television or whatever it was that I'm getting to do. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to really appreciate these gifts or use these gifts, I should develop them. I should work really hard, and I should try to enjoy it. So I think my whys, I have, kind of two whys. I have the why that launched me into all of this, which quite frankly is probably more of a fear-based survival why. And then hopefully when you get a chance to come up for air a little bit, you can define your whys coming from something good versus, a deficit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Kind of the vitamins versus the medicine, kind of proactive. And that's interesting. It's definitely, I think, something for everyone to think about, kind of a subconscious why as well as a conscious. And I thank Matt for bringing the question to the surface, because it's an answer, once again, very unique, and it takes a lot of humility too, to kind of dig deep and have that lens to look back at.
Humility, the other day I was flying back to Hawaii, and I was sat next to this gentleman who is a rabbi, and he actually runs these treatment centers for addicts, right? He had his own experience, and he was talking to me about humility, and he said, humility, no better than, and then he said, and no less than anyone. And I think that's important on both sides, right? It's important. We are no better than our other brothers or sisters, but we're also not less than. And I think kind of connecting with that idea and having peace with that idea is really helpful when you're sort of gliding through life and doing these, having these moments of making big decisions or creating your whys. It's just for a short moment. So I feel like part of the why is like, just, you'll never, not having any regrets that you just didn't do all you could do within who you are. I think it makes it going through life and moving through life and aging and time. It makes it a lot. It's a lot nicer.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on. It applies to comparison too, and putting people on pedestals and having that both sides of humility, the no better than and no less than,
yes,
is key. So we don't get out of our own. I guess stop running our own race and try to run someone else's. But that's very interesting. So you have all of these things going on, Gabby. You're traveling, like you just said. You're in and out, bouncing in and out of Hawaii every couple of days right now. How do you keep your mind healthy?
It's almost like pre-decisions. So let's say I'm getting ready to leave and I see it. I feel anxiety coming because I'm going to not be sleeping. I'm going to be working. If for some reason I'm like this weekend, I travel with my family. But the last 2 weeks, it's been quick trips, 2-3 days, but still there's an element of it feels unnatural for me to be away from my children. Whatever, but I guess that's what I have to get over. So as I start to see if I'm moving in one direction mentally, for example, what I've tried to do, especially for about the last 6 months consciously, is taking words like have to out of my vernacular. So, oh yeah, I have to go to the mainland. Oh, I have to fly to Tucson, whatever. No, I'm going to, I get to work. I am flying. It's like, I've tried to take it out even like I have to go to the grocery store. I'm going to go to the grocery store because I feel like we stack up all these have to's and create anxiety and do all the stuff around it before we've even started. So if I try to look at it as opportunities, I then click towards, like my husband is very good at this, better than I am, like the faith, like my children are going to still develop and be well-adjusted adults, not just because their mother works for a few days here and there. And like how fortunate am I that I'm, working and flying and doing all these things. Because in the end, too, I have to remember that conversely, if I didn't get to do it, I think in the long run, me personally, I need the challenge, and it does I'm able to make myself happy. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe your happiness should come through your work, but I do think being productive and working and challenging yourself does make you feel good. So I think I sort of preset the tone before I start, let's say. And so, a healthy body comes from, I think it can really, they feed each other, right? Like when I can't get there mentally and emotionally, if my body's healthy, it helps me get there the other way. Where also conversely, if I make the decision mentally, then emotionally I'm in a good place, and then it impacts my physical health. So when I go there, it's like rest, try to eat well, but also emotionally and mentally embrace it. Be like, I feel so grateful. And yes, it's going to be a long day. I flew to New York from Hawaii for 13 hours on the ground. Great, whatever. I feel like it starts there. Where if you're like, oh, I'm tired, and it just starts affecting everything.
Yeah, so many of your answers and your frame just seems very strategic and calculated. So I'm wondering if that comes from your athletics background, or if it's just it's interesting your lens, but having that kind of the preconceived even semantics around I get to do something versus I have to do something is so powerful. And it just reminded me, I use Evernote for my note taking on my laptop, and I about a year ago changed my to-do list, Evernote, to my get to-do list. And I giggle when I open it up and, it says taxes or something, but it actually changes my mood for one moment, which then carries on. So whatever it takes, right? Those triggers. When you look at the future and we think about this question of why not now, is there something that you've been thinking about doing that it's time to ask yourself, why not now?
Yeah, and mine, I'm going to be honest with you, is a little bit shallow. I'll be honest, but it's sort of reflective of other things in my life, which is this. I think part of the reason I'm good at a lot of what I do is I have a linearness and a discipline, and I can sort of navigate my way that way. But the other side of that can be a lack of, I won't say flexibility, but I'm almost more comfortable in sort of the list box and having to do things than just do nothing and being. And again, I'm going to use Laird as an example because he's the one who, he'll come in, I joke, and I'll be making dinner, and he'll say, did you look at the moon tonight, or whatever. And I'm like, oh God, like who can be bothered, because I have a list, like I have stuff to get done. And it's created an inflexibility that also has manifested over many years in my physical being. And so I think as I learn and I'm in the space of talking about, being one's best self and movement and stuff, vitality and flexibility of one's body, suppleness is really key to a long-term great health. So the thing I avoid that I have been tackling that I need to approach with discipline like everything else is a level of not attacking things, so not attacking weights and training, but actually moving into flexibility. And because for me, it's like, oh, but that's doing nothing, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not, right? It's important because if I can get that even better, then I can do the other stuff even better. And so it's the same. I think it's reflective of my everyday life as well. That sometimes put the list away. Just be, and if someone gives you a spontaneous invitation to do something that's just 'cause, do that more often. So this is the thing that is really my New Year's resolution. And by the way, I can't do it alone, right? So Laird and I had a job the other day together, and we traveled together, and we sat for an hour doing breathing and stretching. I cannot get that done on my own. There's just no way, and I'm very disciplined. I can do a lot of other things. So I always say this to people, it isn't about not being the way you are. It's just about creating an infrastructure around who you are that helps you be successful and reach those goals. And so this is the thing that I am saying, okay, at this time in my life, I am going to have the faith and the belief that I can be more flexible, not only physically, but within myself. And it's, I can sell that really well to people, like, hey, you can be better. But for me to put it in play in my own life and the places that I'm not good at it, I'm just like everyone else.
That's actually not shallow at all. That's very deep. I think that's really cool. The self-awareness that comes along with just even recognizing that, but also how to accomplish that. Like you mentioned, one of the things is, for example, the other day with these breathing exercises, having someone there that will help set you up for success. Are there any other, little things or logistics that you're doing to guide you toward reaching, this goal and pursuing it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's besides putting it kind of in the physical world, so it's got to get on. I have to make time for it, right? Mm-hmm. Which nobody has any more time than there's no time. There's never time. But then the minute it becomes a priority, all of a sudden there's time. And so it's that, and it's also in the thinking. Okay, if I always walk down the road on the left side, could I just change it up somehow a little bit? If I normally react to something in a less desirable way to me, can I start to work on and practice changing that reaction? And you can, it's like I had a woman, I was sitting on an airplane. I know the date, November 2nd. Last year I was flying to Hawaii. And it was this very nice lady. We were sitting on the plane, and her husband had passed away years before in an accident. And we were just talking, and she looked at me and she said, you don't have to worry about anything. And I was thinking, I've heard that message, many times, but for whatever reason on that day, I actually really heard it. And so I thought, okay, am I going to continue to do things exactly the way I've always done them and react exactly the way, or can I just start to practice a little bit? And some days you do it better than others, and some days you blow it and you go, oh, there's the kind of old reaction and the old me. And I always think, even if as we get older and things have even worked for us, you still have to step back and evaluate and go, hey, the system I have in place, it's pretty good. Is there anything that I can make it better? And it doesn't just always have to be about, work. I think it's the other realms of life, the personal realms, the spiritual realms, the relationships, you're constantly calibrating that. And if you are, then you're sort of living in the reality that you're in. I liken that even to relationships, right? Each day I try to, be my best self for my husband, but then also just kind of step back and go, well, what's working pretty well and maybe could be better. And then I just think we're not as surprised and we're kind of more proactive in designing it, how we see it in our minds and how we want it.
It's refreshing to hear this "why not now," because so often I hear these very tactical, I want to do XYZ, and it's this highly measurable, thing. And it's a little less defined and clear, yet it's such a huge component and has such impact on our lives and every day. So,
but I think if you start with yourself, the tactical and the strategy, right? Those they're certainly not easy. But if you're just always working from the place of where you would like to start from, then your thoughts and your strategies reflect that. So I think it's always, keeping the decks clear with yourself as you're making your strategies, because then you end up at the place that you actually really want to be.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I just interviewed Adam Grant, who is an author and just a very brilliant guy. And he said, a piece of advice that he received years ago from a professor was that, being goal oriented is great and you're clearly good at that and you will accomplish many things, but you need to improve the acuity of your peripheral vision, because a lot of the things that mean the most in life, we can't plan, and you're going to miss them. You're going to miss some things, not only opportunities, but experiences. And so that really resonated. It really resonated with me, that if you know that that's actually a strategy for improvement.
So is defining success, right? I've come to a place now where I've met enough people that are either, big, heads of companies, whatever, billionaires, highly famous, great, wildly talented, super accomplished. But at the end, if I look at a lot of them, you kind of go, yeah, but how's their life? And we're all striving so hard for success on all the levels, right? So financial success, notoriety, whatever it is. And I don't mean fame. I could just mean within your company, whatever. And I think it's kind of asking yourself, yes, but what is success to me? And not be afraid of that, because for some people, it could be to have rich experiences and relationships and to have a really creative platform. For other people, it might be like, lots of zeros on the bottom line, whatever that is. But it's still kind of, what are we truly defining as success? Because, I see these people, they reach the highest of mountains and, kind of everything else is in shambles. And you go, oh, man, it seems like a pretty high price. And a lot of times what people don't realize, especially financial success, big money success, the collateral damage usually on one's family can be pretty radical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such a good point and question to really keep top of mind. And to wrap us up, I have a few rapid fire questions for you. The first is, what are you reading right now, or what's your all-time favorite book?
Oh, geez. Well, my all-time, I'm reading, I just finished Sapiens, and it's excellent. It's just a great read. It kind of puts, again, it's just a perspective on mankind and like living naturally and how we're in ways living unnaturally, and, just kind of that conversation. And when I was 14, I had a friend give me Atlas Shrugged. I just remember it kind of shifted the way I looked a little bit at the world. And I think it influenced me in a different way. So that was an interesting book for me to read at that time in my life.
Awesome. And what keeps you up at night, Gabby?
Again, I admit to having, because I didn't grow up with a ton of stability, I think I'm always looking for kind of even everywhere. And I think what keeps me up keeps everyone up. It's like your kids, and you're trying to do a good job. And then, sort of after I go through those rounds of conversations, I just try to say to myself, like, you have to do your best and then have the faith, and also remind myself, ultimately, I'm not really in control. I'm in control of what I'm doing and saying, but you can't control everything. So at a certain point, you have to have a leap of faith and go through life with some faith.
Absolutely. And final question, what advice would you give to your younger self? And you can choose what age you would give that advice to.
I've said this, I've been asked this question quite a bit. One is I would tell my young self, by 17 or 18, don't take anything personal, and you are not going to please everyone. So work with pleasing yourself and the people that you have real relationships with, and kind of let it ride everywhere else, because you can't worry about it. It's hard not to worry about. I still, the great thing about having a public job is I get criticized publicly. That's always, that's a great lesson. It is. And especially like you think like I'm being genuine, I'm trying to put out something positive, and people like, you suck, you're like, wow, okay. I think you let it ride. And also we take ourselves so serious and have so much self-importance. And I'm really like, always working to have the perspective of, don't take myself so serious. And what I'm doing is not that important, except the role of like with my family. And so, relax with that a little bit, have some humor.
Awesome advice. And I am grateful, and I just want to thank you for just the radical honesty that you bring in your interviews and just in general, and it shines through. So thank you so much, and also for your time. I'm grateful.
Yeah.
And I wish you nothing but continued success.
Well, thank you. And I think it's a great conversation that you're putting out there. And for people who are, kind of crossing those bridges, it's always scary, even if you have been, you've done it before, successful. But if you sort of measured it out and it sort of feels pretty good, I always think it's great to kind of go for it.
Absolutely. What's the worst thing that can happen is usually not that bad, right? So it's kind of thinking through and reverse engineering. But thank you for being a great example of that. And I appreciate you taking the time.
Okay. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Gabby. Bye-bye.
Aloha. Bye-bye.
A few of the things that really stood out to me about that conversation with Gabby were, one, this concept of humility. And oftentimes we think of being humble and we think of humility as, I am no better than anyone else. But also there's another side of the coin, and Gabby points this out, and that is, I am no less than anyone else as well. And I think that that's something that often gets overlooked, is that second side of it. And the other thing is this concept of having a bit of a subconscious why you do what you do, as well as a conscious why. And that's an interesting take that I haven't heard before that Gabby points out. Now, we've had a very interesting week. The past week, we've had a new president come into office in the United States. The inauguration took place, and then immediately the day after, there was a very large gathering globally of men and women to support women's rights and to vocalize their support for women's rights. And it's been an interesting week in a sense that, yes, we've had a pretty big shift in power. We've had a lot of people stand up and vocalize what they believe in. I'm curious to hear if anyone who is listening has used this past week to really spark their own why not now, to use this past week as momentum to take action on maybe something they've been thinking about doing, but specifically because of the events that have taken place. Please let me know if you have. I'd love to hear from you, and also possibly include your story, because it's amazing how many people are vocalizing their opinions, but taking action is really what matters the most. So I'd love to share some more of that. And as we think of this paradigm shift of media and media in our world today, We have this convergence of online anonymity. We have the personality of President Donald Trump. We have a lack of trust in the traditional media mixed with fake news, mixed with alternative facts, which just kind of surfaced this last week. And so we have this kind of perfect storm happening. So there's never been a time where our voices are as powerful as they are now, especially with the use of social media. But what really matters is mobilizing those voices, right? And taking action. So please share any stories you might have, any examples. I want to hear what your why not now is. Please share it with me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Amy Jo Martin. I'll send a signed copy of my New York Times best-selling book, Renegades Write the Rules, to the first 200 people who listen, rate, and leave an honest review of the podcast in iTunes. And you'll also get a free month subscription from our friends at Headspace. This is only available to Why Not Now listeners. Once you've left a rating and review on iTunes, just email your iTunes handle name and your mailing address to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com, and we'll get your package in the mail to you. For detailed show notes, head to amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. That's where you'll find links to things we discussed on the show, special offers, and how you can keep in touch with guests. Hat tip to my buddies Ash and Devin at Rock Salt Music for our tunes today. You just listened to the talented John Coggins in Let's Go and Let It Ride. And a jump high five to my talented husband, Richard Greer, for producing the show and being patient with me. See you next time. Until then, why not now?